Good afternoon. So I will talk about how to minimize the risks of cross-border reproductive care, cross-border surrogacy. First of all, I will define the term cross-border surrogacy, what it is, why this trend is occurring. Then I will talk about the solution, which is outsourcing. You will understand what I mean with this. I will compare surrogacy, surrogates that travel, or embryos that travel. And as an example, I will give you our USA-Mexico program. So first of all, what is cross-border surrogacy? It has to do with surrogacy, obviously, and with traveling. Either surrogates travel to the location where the embryos are for transfer, or the embryos travel to where the surrogates live. Okay, why do we have to talk about cross-border surrogacy? The reason is that since the big surrogacy hubs, India, Thailand, Nepal, and Cambodia, have been closed, especially for same-sex couples and for single parents, there are not many affordable options left, especially for these intended parents. Married straight couples can still do the process in Ukraine or in Georgia, for example. The last destination where surrogacy can be done for those couples or for those intended parents is the United States. Traditionally, in the United States, all family types can do this treatment, so there's no need to be married or to be straight. You have legal certainty, so all the contracts are everyone is having contracts with everyone. There are fixed representatives of all parties. And the most important thing is that if the baby is born in the United States, they get the US passport and can easily travel home to wherever they live. The problem in the United States or with American programs is basically the cost. So you can see here, in India, a program used to cost around $30,000. In Thailand, 45,000. Ukraine and Georgia, a little bit more expensive. But the US is, if you want to do a full-fledged program in the United States, it will cost you around $180,000 to $200,000. So our idea or our solution to this is just take the part in the United States that is really necessary, which is the surrogacy part. We are working with American surrogate mothers that live in the United States, that are Americans, and all the legal part as well happens in the United States, but all the other parts, the medical part, the egg donors if needed, all the other things are outsourced, happens in another country. So, for example, egg donors, if they are needed, there are also healthy and fertile donors outside the United States. For example, in Mexico or in South Africa, in Ukraine, and they can travel to the clinics or to the locations where the embryos are made. Here you can see a picture of 4 Ukrainian egg donors who visited our clinic in Phnom Penh last month. We took them out for dinner. They come from Ukraine, for example. Another possibility for egg donation is to use egg banks, donor egg banks. For a couple of years now, it is more and more common to use frozen donor eggs. For example, in Spain, where I live, Spain is a very important egg donation hub. I think this is the leading country for egg donation in the world. And there's not one single clinic that is using fresh donor eggs. Nearly all the clinics are using egg banks. And this brings the costs down as well, because the donors don't have to fly intercontinental flights. They don't have to be lodged in good hotels. They don't have to be fed. They can do the retrievals where they live. Then the eggs are frozen, and we can just ship the eggs to the location where the embryos are made. And this brings the costs down significantly. We have several locations, several clinics that we are working with, for example, in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, or in Life Cryobank in Mexico. Life Cryobank in Mexico is a special clinic in the way that they are founded by embryologists. This clinic is founded by an embryologist and not by doctors. So these embryologists are really, they know what they are doing. Their lab is world class. I'm working with them during the last 4 or 5 years, and I have never been disappointed. They are really good. So for the medical part, we prefer to use this clinic in Mexico. Now, talking about the ease of surrogate mothers, especially American surrogates, to travel abroad. First of all, it is important to understand that even if there is a full American program, even in this case, it is very rare that the surrogate mothers live at the location where the embryos are. So in nearly all American programs, the surrogate mothers also have to travel. And in some occasions, the embryos are located on the West Coast, and the surrogate mother lives at the East Coast. This is a 4 to 5 hours flight as well. And there's really no difference of the surrogate traveling inside the US or from the US to Mexico, which is, Guadalajara is the second largest city in Mexico, and there are many direct flights from the major cities in the US to Guadalajara. Usually the surrogate mothers enjoy these trips. We treat them very well. We give them 5-star hotels. We take them out for dinners. We organize sightseeing tours. So they see it as some kind of fun trip. Here you can see 2 American surrogate mothers that have visited us last month in Phnom Penh. Both of them are pregnant now. The other way to do it is you could create the embryos outside the US and then bring the embryos for transfer into the United States. There are some groups who are using this way, which is also working well. The only problem is that if you want to bring embryos or any reproductive tissue into the US, they are controlled by the American Food and Drug Administration. So there are certain conditions that you have to test the donors, for example, before the egg retrieval. They have these blood tests and urine tests have to be done in special licensed FDA labs that are only located in the United States. So they are shipped with special test kits with cooling units, and they have to reach within a certain time frame to these US labs. If you are working with clinics or with groups that are used to this kind of way, they are prepared, and it usually works well. But sometimes there are delays in the flights, or these blood samples are held in customs and they don't reach in a certain time to this US lab, and then the sample is bad. It cannot be used anymore. So sometimes this happens, and then the blood test has to be repeated. Sometimes the egg donor is already at home and has to be found and brought again to one of these labs or locations that can do these blood tests. So it is a way which is possible, but after having tested this way and having surrogate mothers traveling, we prefer the second way. Another important question or issue is the risk of traveling after the embryo transfer. There are people who think that the embryos might fall out after the transfer, or that traveling, the pressure difference in the plane may have some influence. All this is not true. If you can see this picture above, this is an ultrasound picture of a recent transfer. You can see the uterus, you can see the lining, which is the blue field, and then the little bubble, which is the microdrop of medium, which contains the embryos. If you transfer day 5 embryos, which are blastocysts, within a couple of hours, the embryos will hatch and attach to the uterine wall, and then they stay there. Either they implant or they don't. But whatever you do after the transfer will not influence what happens inside the uterus. You can take bumps, you can carry heavy things, you can run marathons. It will not affect the implantation. You can go to home pages of any serious clinic around the world and read up what they say about traveling after transfer. There's not one single clinic or doctor that has ever said that it has a bad impact. So traveling after every embryo transfer is not a problem. Now, comparing surrogates that travel against embryos that travel, both of them are there or are used to reduce the costs. So the costs are about the same. The risk of traveling embryos is that it has to be done by very experienced and professional people who know how to ship embryos. Because I have done this many times myself, and it is not easy sometimes to convince the security people at the airport to let your sample go without x-rays. There's a guy suddenly standing with a can and saying, look, we cannot x-ray this. And you have to really sometimes convince them and produce the relevant papers and permissions, and each country is different. In Spain, it is enough to show my doctor identity card. In Ukraine, you have to show the letter from the government with stamp and everything that you have the permission to do this. So otherwise, if the samples get x-rayed, it's not good. Another thing is that some airports are really difficult, like Istanbul, for example. If you go through these airports, then they might hold you back. You miss your connection flights. It's not easy. It can be done, of course, but letting the surrogate mothers fly is much easier. And of course, there's the need for FDA testing that I have mentioned earlier. On the other hand, letting the surrogate mothers travel, as I mentioned, it's not a problem at all. Okay, this is the solution that we have found the best at the moment. It is giving the sperm sample in Mexico. So you would have to fly to Mexico for giving the sperm sample. Then next thing is you are looking for an egg donor if you need. And this egg donor can travel to Mexico from South Africa or Ukraine, or you can also use local egg donors in Mexico. Another possibility is using frozen eggs that can be shipped to the clinic in Guadalajara. And then we would create the embryos there. Then the American surrogate mother would be prepared in the United States, screened and prepared for transfer. And then she would fly to Guadalajara, and we do the transfer there. And then she would fly home and do all the pregnancy tests, the whole pregnancy delivery, everything happens in the United States. So it's basically a full American program as far as the surrogacy part is concerned, and all the medical part is outsourced. And the passport is, the American passport is very fast. Within a day or two, you can have the passport. And as soon as the baby is in conditions to travel, then you can take it home. And if you want to get an Australian passport, then you can do all the procedures here. So this talk was about risk of this kind of programs. We are not the only one who are offering these kind of programs, but I think most of the programs are fixed price programs. That means that there's no risks in the cost or the price that you pay include as many transfers as needed to get the baby, as long as we use egg donors. And my partner Lily and I, both of us have over 10 years experience with these kind of cross-border surrogacy treatments, and it's a pregnancy guarantee program. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm wondering what the success rates are of the difference between moving frozen eggs over there to have that done compared to fresh eggs.
Okay.
In a cycle.
The fresh eggs have the advantage that they are fresh. If you freeze eggs, it depends on the person and on the donor if these eggs are freezable. Some donors have a perfect egg quality, and there's absolutely no difference between frozen or fresh in this particular donor. Some donors or some women, if they have a little weaker egg quality, they may perform better in fresh cycles, and some of these eggs may not survive the thawing process. Once the eggs get fertilized, the embryo development and the blastocyst formation rate is about the same. But in our programs, it is irrelevant in this case, because we are the ones who guarantee the success. So if we take a donor and we take frozen donor eggs and they don't survive, then it's our problem in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Do embryos translate? Are they okay?
Yes. As long I mentioned earlier, as long as it is a person who is experienced with shipping embryos, then there's no problem. Usually these shippers, they are about that size, and they are filled with liquid nitrogen vapor. So it's a vapor phase, and as long as the embryos are staying in this vapor, they stay frozen, and there's no problem.
My understanding is there is a risk, though, of losing some of those embryos on thawing. Is that right? What sort of risk is there of losing a percentage on thaw?
All this depends on the embryo quality and, of course, of the skills of the embryologist who froze the embryos and the one who thaws it. Freezing embryos has been done for many years now. now we have a new technology which is called vitrification, which comes from this egg banking, and now we also vitrify the embryos, which gives them a much higher survival rate. And embryos are much easier to freeze than eggs. So with this new technology, this vitrification, I think there's a survival rate of nearly 95%.
I've got another question very quickly. You just mentioned that it was very difficult for you to get, I don't know what it was, a specimen into Istanbul. I'm asking because my partner actually lives in Turkey. I was under the impression that anything entering or exiting Turkey was illegal in terms of sperm, egg, embryo. Am I wrong?
No, I was not shipping anything into Istanbul. I was just transiting in Istanbul.
Transiting, okay.
And you land, and then there's a security check.
Right, yes.
And then you go to the department floor.
It was just a transit.
And the transit was a nightmare.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to confirm. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Any other question?
Just 1 second, so people at the back can actually hear you. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. When you say pregnancy guaranteed, what do you actually mean other than you have a live birth? Is that
Yes.
like what you pay for is at the
You
end
pay-
you will get a live pregnancy
Yes.
with those eggs,
If you use
embryos?
if you use egg donors, I mean not your own eggs, but egg donors, then we create as many embryos as necessary and we perform as many transfers as necessary until we have a live baby. This means the pregnancy guarantee. Then we have to create new ones. At some point, no, we take this risk. You don't have to pay anything extra. So if for some reason we have no more embryos left, we have done 5 transfers in different surrogate mothers, we will just take another egg donor, stimulate her, create new embryos, and then transfer again.
This guarantee program is only available for egg donors, surrogacy, not using your own eggs. But there are high-cost programs, but they guarantee the outcome because they'll make sure they use donors to those people already, but they're confident the donors have brought out success rates.
Yes, because we know these donors are young and fertile and have no fertility problems. If you wanted to use your own eggs, then we would guarantee the surrogacy part. I mean, as many transfers as necessary to get the surrogate pregnant. But if you need another stimulation, another egg retrieval, another medical creation of embryos, then this part you would have to bear.
Well, thanks, Marcus. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.